our group and the Black coaches community would like to obviously welcome you if this is your first day to the convention, but have you join us this afternoon for our panel, which is going to be discussing how to navigate the professional landscape as a coach, and that's going to cover a variety of levels. Just because we know within the room and within ourselves and our experiences, we've had the chance to see the game from many different perspectives, and wanted to shed some light and shed some stories and probably laugh a couple times too, just because that's kind of who we are. But really quickly, I'm going to start from the other end of the stage and get us started. Just to introduce yourself, and if you want to share any interesting tidbits, go ahead.
Sammy, Boateng, in transition, I guess. First laugh. Oh, vice chair of the Black soccer coaches. Free agent.
Marsha, Harper, head coach at American University, vice chair, national vice chair.
Maya Hayes, and I'm an assistant at the University of Minnesota and national vice chair.
Anything else?
No, nothing else.
Mario Felix, I am an additional national vice chair. I am director of Girls Academy at Kansas Rush Soccer Club and newly appointed assistant coach at Kansas State University.
That was a sad applause, but we're happy for you. We're happy for you. Yeah. I'm Andrew Richardson. I am just completing year one as the chairperson for the Black coaches community. Again, all of us have known each other for quite some time, and within our group, we're really committed to just elevating the voices of those unheard, or elevating the opportunities available to all of us within the game. Naturally, we do it from a Black perspective because that's what resonates with us. But at the same time, we've all been in different rooms and have interactions and have friends and allies that support us, and we try to do the same. So again, it says navigating the professional landscape as a Black collegiate head, collegiate, high school, youth, whatever that may be. The information we're going to give is pertinent to everyone, because those are the environments that we're in, and that's I think the advice we can give. So again, we want you to interact. I know that I've sat in panels before and not felt like being the person that raises their hand. So that QR code will actually be on every slide. That takes you to the Black Soccer Coaches Twitter page, and the pinned tweet at the top is actually where you can ask questions if you'd rather do that as opposed to asking at the end. So nice and simple. But the first question to get us started, Marsha, I'm gonna have you kick us off. What is something that you know now that you wish you knew at the start of your career?
How many of us have had really exciting things happen in our career? Show of hands. Okay. You're about to raise it. Don't think about it.
It's about to happen?
Okay, very good. Okay, and then also show of hands, how many of us have had things that we didn't expect or some might view as unfortunate? Okay, yeah. I think starting out, especially when I started out as a young coach, I was really gung-ho, super excited. We've all seen that animation or graphic that success is not linear, instead it's, goes all over the place. I think telling myself that there's gonna be a lot that you're gonna be really excited about, really proud of, but also there's gonna be a lot that is gonna hit you and it's gonna take you down. How long you stay down, though, is something that I think is super important. I talk to my players about bounciness. That's what I coined it. And by that, it's just soccer is a game of air, so there's gonna be things that happen all the time. Ball goes out for a throw-in, that's an error, right? You mess up on a scout, that's an error, right? But there's gonna be some things that happen that you just can't plan for, and that's okay. But how long that you stay down is gonna be super important, in my opinion, to your success.
we had a question similar to this last year, and I think my answer is somewhat still the same. One thing that I wish I would have known, and I had a couple people tell me this, one of them being Kai, being one of my bosses and helped me get into this profession years ago, is it's gonna take time and be patient with it, right? And so when I was in it originally, it was like, go, 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 go. How quickly can I get to where I wanted to get to? And not necessarily realizing every single year, every single thing that's been told, session, scouting report, recruiting, budgets, whatever it may be, there's a process, and be intentional about retaining that information, making it your own, right? And then allowing it to prepare you for that time when you have an opportunity to sit in front of an admin and actually have a plan in place, right? And so I got into head coaching really, really early. And when I went back and just kind of reflected, I'm like, holy smokes, I had no idea what I was doing. And it wasn't even the coaching part, it's all the logistical things that I had no idea about, right? Everyone wants to be a head coach, not realizing what that budget meeting looks like, what that admin meeting looks like, right? What the recruiting conversations are looking like on a regular basis. Everyone's looking at the end result, but for me, reflecting on it now, it's like, slow down, really, really formulate a plan, really, really take in the information that you're being given at every stop that you're at, and try to make it your own, but be intentional with it, because when you're sitting in front of an admin, you got to make sure that you know what it is that you're conveying to them, because our margin of error is significantly smaller than most of our counterparts in our profession. And so I think it's extremely important to understand is you have to be buttoned up. And it doesn't mean be perfect, but have an answer, have a plan, be confident within that. And I think when I first got into it, it's like, I know it, I saw someone else do it, I'm ready, let's go. And then realizing like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And it was overwhelming. So I think for me, it's definitely, any advice would be really take your time and absorb it and take advantage and live in that moment without always looking at what's the next thing.
Yeah, I would say, I guess by show of hands, how many people in this room played youth soccer to some capacity? Okay, great. How many people played in college? Great. And
She could also keep going for a little while.
No.
National team,
Professional
pro,
draft, All-American.
All-American.
That wasn't
Big
the
Ten.
point. That wasn't the point of the question. No, like I think, honestly, it was I went from playing into coaching. I felt vastly different, I guess. And it felt like that first time that you ever go to your first soccer practice when you're a kid, like my first actual coaches convention, I felt like a fish out of water. And I was like, I'm not gonna know anybody. What I quickly realized is you don't realize how many connections you actually have made along the way from people that you have played with. And it could be 15 years ago, but that now they're in coaching. Maybe obviously the school that you went to, if your coaches are still coaching and in the game, that connection in and of itself, but even kind of the lateral connection to that, being like coaches that maybe recruited you, and as we all know sitting in this room, I'm sure you guys all work from like developing a relationship with the kids that you're trying to recruit. So that kind of came back tenfold. I developed relationships with coaches that I didn't end up going to their school, but kept it cordial, and lo and behold, however many years later, I was walking past them in these hallways, and it was another connection I didn't know I had in this world, if I'm being honest. Especially in a room that looks like us. And so I guess that would be my biggest piece of advice to myself and to anybody that if this is your first convention, is lean on the network that you didn't even know you had as you start to kind of develop the new network of things. Because it's certainly there for you, but it almost takes you have to look back more than you maybe thought you did.
Okay, well, we'll move on to the next question. Those are great answers. How does a young coach get their name out there for opportunities? Sammy, I'm actually going to start with you, just because I think the 30 under 30 is a unique piece that kind of maybe altered the journey a little bit.
Yeah, so for me, I think, one, putting yourself out there and finding different opportunities. And when I say opportunities, I don't just mean just coaching. Opportunities to be in someone's office and seeing what office work looks like. Reaching out to coaches in your area. So for me, when I got started within college coaching, I started as a volunteer. And volunteering, figuring out how to navigate player meetings, how to put a session together, how to put a scout together, how to start the recruiting process. To be able to learn all that, being able to put yourself in those spaces is huge. So reaching out to coaches around you, whether it's the high school level, club level, college level, and now I think with the social media piece there, you can advertise for yourself. You know, student athletes in college right now and have NIL. And it's like, as coaches, why can't you also promote yourself? So you can promote yourself by showing the work that you've done, but also putting in the time and effort to be able to meet other coaches, reach out to other coaches. There are plenty of times when I started at Marshall as a volunteer, I sent out, I don't know how many emails of reaching out to coaches in the area of, can I come watch your session? Can I come work your camp? Even when I was on the men's side, I used to stay after training for us and watch the women's team train and ask questions and write notes. So for me, I think as a young coach, putting yourself out there in uncomfortable situations so you get comfortable and expanding your network, because at the end of the day, we all know within the coaching world, it's who you know, not what you know. Who can put your name forward and say, hey, I know this person does a lot of really good work and they need an opportunity, and if I have the opportunity to help them out and help them grow and help them stretch, they're going to be able to put your name out there. So I think you know, that's an important piece for me of young coaches being able to get their name and get some opportunities.
To add to that, I would say be willing to say yes to things even if you know it's not the end goal. So for example, I've actually coined this recently. We'll call it does anybody watch the Miami Dolphins at all? A little bit, we at least know who Mike McDaniels is, the head coach. I'm calling it the Mike McDaniels pathway, because I think he started as like an equipment manager and is now obviously the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. So especially when you're first starting out, that is going to look vastly different than whatever the end goal is, or even the middle goal. And so, yeah, washing laundry, for example, it's probably not going to be what you want to be doing, and it's certainly maybe not what you want to be doing years into your career, but it's a pathway along the way. And so what I guess the main thing I mean by that is immerse yourself and realize that the littlest things make a massive difference. For me, that was saying yes to basically any environment of coaching per se, and the reason why I put coaching in quotations is honestly one of my very first experiences getting into this environment was soccer shots. And if anybody knows what soccer shots is, it's really young kids, like really young kids. Like one of the youngest age group I had was 3 to 5 year olds. And honestly, my first thought process was like, wow, I'm gonna be babysitting, right? However, one, I for sure learned my coaching voice within that, because if you can wrangle up 3 to 5 year olds, you can certainly get 18 to 22 year olds to listen to whatever message you're putting out. But two, you realize like how to actually navigate a group, right? And so saying yes to that opportunity, which I thought was going to be babysitting, kind of evolved into me learning what my coaching style would be, how to relate to a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old when I'm coaching. And then it quickly turned into, when I was a graduate assistant at Auburn, saying yes to any version of an IB camp, not because, yes, it came with money for sure, but not because of the money, the price on it. It's a little bit to what Sammy was saying of like, when you're in those environments, and it's especially kind of the big ones where they just bring in a bunch of coaches, you get to one, network, but two, it's a ever evolving learning environment. not just for you working with a group of kids and how do you maneuver a group of kids that you don't know, right? And how do you get them to get on board with whatever the session is and to understand whatever the session is. But two, you're naturally in an environment where you're then watching other people maybe do something similar, a similar session, something vastly different, maybe use a tone or whatever it is, little tweaks here and there that you didn't have, that helps you kind of hone that style in even more. So I guess that was my version of kind of getting out there and honing in on the craft a bit. But yeah, be willing to say yes.
To add on to that, I think we get this question a lot. How does someone get their name out there? Everyone's name is already out there, right? Like Google is a real thing. So for me, it's how much weight does your name carry? And what is attached to your name, right? And we talk about networking, right? When people think of your name, do they think of a group of people? If they do, what's that network? What's that group of people, right? In return, do those group of people want to be associated with you, right? So it's kind of like, what stock does your name have? And for me, she talked a little bit about it. It's also adding into your own personal stock. When someone thinks of you, do they think that you're a tactician, right? Do they think that you have like a really big personality? You're going to be great for team culture, those sorts of things, right? Because all of us are uniquely different. That's why they call us individuals. And so whether you're recruiting a person or people on your staff, right? Like when I hired my staff, both of my assistants are very different, and that was intentional. I also got that from my college coach, Becky Burley. Her assistants, very different back in the day, if you knew those. But it's what works. So I think for me, when you talk about like putting your name out there, everyone's name is out there, right? If you Google someone's name, what comes up? So I just charge people to think about like, what are you intentionally doing to add stock to your own name? And like he talked about, we're in the age of social media, you know? Actually, I don't know if KD's in the room, but his social media at Georgia, I mean, I'm liking everything that comes out. I almost retweet it, but then I'm like, oh, that might go against my own team. So, you know, but stuff like that is super significant, especially if you're a young coach coming up. Like that is something that is almost like you have to do, it seems like, in today's day and age. And it's, if I'm recruiting someone across the country, I am looking up at these showcases. Oh, I like her, let me add her name. What comes up? Let me scroll through her social media. Same thing people do from a hiring standpoint as well, right? Because if I'm going to bring someone and attach them to my name, I want to know what they're adding or taking away from my stock. You guys will also learn that I talk a lot, so I'm going to cut the mic off.
Just to add to one other thing about that is, as a young coach, one thing I've reflected on is conducting yourself in a professional manner. You never know who's looking, and what you might think is fun, what you might think is cool, you're younger, this, that, and the other, people are watching, and it's important. Phone calls happen on a regular basis. Even at times, you might not even know your name is being discussed, and you've done a well enough job, or you've gotten people's attention, and now people are calling and saying, hey, what about this person? I'm curious, what are your thoughts? They worked with you, so on and so forth. Prime example, with my role as a club director, I do a college ID camp in the summer. We had a young man from a junior college work a camp, and he was picking Kadani's brain, he's picking Kai's brain, and he's just engaged, like, what do I need to do? How do I do this? He even got emotional with the guys, like, man, I'm really trying to figure life out in this realm, this, that, and the other. Well, by the end of the camp, he was offered a job at Little Rock, Arkansas. And he decided to stay at his junior college, and now he's a full-time Division I assistant. Went from a junior college to a full-time Division I first assistant, solely off the fact that he manages himself in a professional manner at the college ID camp, which I had for a day and a half. And he was professional, his session was okay, but he was like engaged. How can I help? Hey, you need help here? Hey, Kai, please tell me how you run, your missing cone drill that you run, Hey, KD, tell me about whatever and he sat there till 2 a.m. in the hotel lobby. And before you know it, less than 6 months later, this man went from, no one really knew who he was, junior college coach, to now a full-time Division I assistant, because he conducted himself in a very professional manner, and people were impressed with the way he went about his business. And at the same time, call a spade a spade. A lot of us, what we do is going to make or break our bosses' jobs. Another facet to think about, and we're talking about in the landscape of black coaches, there's been 4 black head coaches in Division I women's soccer that have had a Division I job more than once. So when we get opportunities, it comes, and the second chance might not ever come again. So no matter what you're doing, it might not reflect now, but 5 years down the road, when that call comes, it might not work for you. Because what you thought was having fun and being social, the one that was around you and now has a job is like, man, I remember that person, but I don't know what they're gonna do in terms of me retaining or maintaining my job. And like I said, 4, right? There's over, we did the statistic earlier in the podcast, right? There's over 538 between Division I and men and women. 4.7% of those 538 Division I programs are black head coaches. 4%. NWSL, less than 8%. Right? And so when we get opportunities, they may not come again. And so we have to be intentional about how we conduct ourselves on social media, what we like, what we retweet. Social media is important. We do it with I recruit kids and I'm like, okay, this girl hasn't posted a picture about soccer. Does she really want to be in this? You know? And it reflects. You see people's personality on how they project themselves in person, on social media, at camps, whatever it may be. And so I might like you and we're good friends, but I'm sitting there thinking, man, if I get this head coaching job, I really like that person. Am I gonna lose my job because of them? And now I know I might not ever get that head coaching opportunity again. And that is the very harsh reality of being a black coach in college soccer. So it's a significantly big impact. And right now it might not make sense or might not be important to you or have value. But when that hard conversation comes down the road and someone say, man, I really like you, but here's a list of things that I'm a little bit of weary, and I know that I got a family to provide for, I got mouths to feed, right? And I'm not trying to move around and lose my job or having to go to a different environment or a different profession because someone I brought on is gonna put me in a predicament to where I might not be able to sustain this job for a very long time. So that's another facet, just kind of adding on to that last question.
Just really quickly as well, how many, by a show of hands, how many coaches are not, in this room are not collegiate coaches, working in club space or high school space or anything like that? Okay, just because I wanted to cover it from this end as well. I spent the last 12 years prior to this as an administrator in a private high school. I've spent time as a club administrator. So when we're talking about looking at it from a coach's perspective, what we remember doing, I think it's also important to kind of hear it from the other end. Because, you know, as an associate athletic director, I've hired varsity football coaches. I've hired middle school soccer coaches. I've sat in on meetings with, you know, board members and this and that and whatever. And I will tell you this, from a hiring perspective, exactly what he said. My job is on the line every time I make a hire. Because for me in a private school, I can't put myself into a situation where I don't do my homework on the person I'm hiring. Because the moment I hire you, I'm attached to you. So that is important. And on the final thing is, before we move on to the next question, is when you're putting together your resume and you're submitting that to people and you get fortunate enough to get the opportunity, please be who you are on that piece of paper. Please, because I will tell you the truth. There have been plenty of times where I've made hires on my soccer staff, where I've made hires in other sports, where I've worked with people who have gotten opportunities, and on paper, a resume can show you everything except work ethic. It can tell you experience, it can tell you whose references, who's gonna do that, and a lot of people, a lot of times when they are doing a reference for you, they're gonna do what they can to get you an opportunity. But if I call a reference and someone says, hey, this is the person who you want, they're gonna be first in the door, last out the door, take a chance, and you're not that person, you've now affected yourself, you've affected the person who hired you, and you've now affected the person who stuck their nose out for you to get you an opportunity. So just keep that in mind as well as you go. We want to move on to the next question, because this is a big one that I think I know the association has put a big emphasis on this year. How does one negotiate with employers in regards to raises and/or pay increases? Do you want us to put your news out there, or you want to keep that to yourself?
Well, guess I have to put it out there.
Yeah,
now.
I did that.
I got an extension, so that's what he's.
Oh my God, Mario.
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, you in order, again, just through my lived experience, in order to continue to negotiate your contract, whether it be years or increase in pay for yourself or for your assistants, side note, you have to be really good at what you do and be confident in saying that about yourself, right? Not only saying it, but obviously also showing it. So I've mentioned this a few times, but my mom is retired, but she was a lieutenant colonel in the Army. And also a black woman, side note. So that was interesting growing up. But she talked to me a lot about leadership and what that means. And she often said, like, you know, make yourself so valuable to whatever your institution is that they can't afford to lose you. And so I try and live that on a daily basis, and it's hard. But obviously on paper, we're soccer coaches, but through the way that we carry ourselves, I think that's what's significant. And what I try to bring to my organization is specific to my soccer team and the people that work with me. But also, when I see a student athlete walking down the hallway at American University, if they're mine, of course, I'm gonna talk to them, but even if they're not mine, I'm gonna stop them, you know, and ask them about how their day is. And it initially caught people off guard. But now all the student athletes that walk by me know that they have to at least like look up from their phone for like 4 seconds, because I'm gonna stop and be like, hey, and they're like, hey coach, you know. But those things I've heard now travel through teams. And I don't need to get on my soapbox, but the impact of saying hi to somebody goes far. And you never know what someone's going through, side note. But I think for me, working through trying to hone in on my craft as it relates to soccer, and consciously I like to say that I have a hunger to get better every day. And that is from a tactical standpoint, but also from like an emotional standpoint, emotional intelligence standpoint, how you relate to other people and communicate with them, and knowing their discs. Shout out to Kai, disc assessment. But I think, how are you on paper, but also intangibly, what impact are you making in your environment? And do people genuinely like to be around you? Right? I mean, I'm sure some people don't like to be around me, but I try to every day like ask people how they're doing and just make a human connection with people, and also enhance the department as a whole. And I can get into a bunch of stuff, but our staff, in my opinion, has raised our athletic department just from a functional standpoint. Some of the things that we weren't doing on a limited budget, we are trying to help influence in a positive way. And my athletic director has said that he's seen that within me and my staff. So to be very candid, after every semester, not every year, after every semester, I've had another school come after me, and I've been able to have conversations with my administration in some capacity. That was scary at first, but I also have really great people in my life and mentors that are like, no, if you're good, you're good. Like, say that this is what you're worth. And so I'm trying to get more comfortable at saying like, yeah, I'll take that, you know. And I'm still, so if anyone has a course on how to negotiate contracts, let me know. But still going through that.
So one thing I'll say really quickly is, in order to negotiate, you need to have an idea about the person who's writing that check. You need to know what their metrics are in order to progress in the way that you want to. So I'll give you an example. Some people, as administrators, and I'm sure some of us have worked for some, they make decisions on how they feel. If you make them feel like you're doing a good job, if they come and see you train and they feel like you're, representing their school or their club or their environment well, that's what matters to them. There are some people who might have an AD or a club administrator or a sport administrator, whatever that may be, a GM, and they want to know numbers. So like, just to put round numbers on it, if I'm at a private college and tuition is $25,000 and I take my roster from 20 to 30, you need to be able to keep up with the fact that like, hey, I'm bringing the school more money now. That's what I'm doing. That's what my level, that's what your investment into me, this is the return that I provide. So one, getting to know the person that's going to sign your checks is valid and really important because you need to know which way you need to approach the conversation. But on the other side, you need to know kind of how to develop the metrics that you're going to be evaluated on. Because for me as an administrator, if I had a coach come in and say, hey, I'm making X amount, I want to make X plus 5, I need to think, when I watch you, do you look like X plus 5? Do your kids think of you as X plus 5? Do the people who interact with you think of X plus 5? And then on paper, when we count numbers, what is showing me that an investment into you is going to return me more that's equal or greater to the amount I'm going to give you? Because at the end of the day, we all work in a business of some sort. So if you're at a school, especially if you're an independent school, if you're at a college, they operate on the bottom line. You work at a club, they operate on the bottom line. Know what your impact is to that and make sure that when they put more into you, they're also going to get more on the other end. People don't give money just because they're nice.
Just to add to that, just previously being a head coach for 3 years, every year I got a pay raise. And just being blunt, it's because someone else wanted me. So the current school I was at had to show that they also valued me as much as someone else valued me. So being able to work hard at your craft and being good at your craft so that maybe someone else values you and wants to bring you in. And unfortunately, within the business world and in the college world, yeah, it's great with the kids, but it's also a business. So being able to do well in what you do and someone else valuing what you do and who you are will make, hopefully, your current employers value you a little bit more and show you that they do want you there, and then being able to now negotiate and say, well, this person's gonna give me whatever it is, what are you gonna give me? You know, so that now you're upping yourself and you're helping your staff, but you're also now getting a pay raise and they now have to show you how much they value you. And being upfront with them and saying, hey, they just called me. And it's not being cocky, it's just being real.
The last thing I'll add to that is have a circle, have a group of individuals that you can confide in, right? And so not everyone's gonna know how to maneuver through these negotiations. Not everyone's gonna know how to have these sometimes awkward conversations, right? Money's never an easy conversation in any capacity, sport or not. But having a mentor, having a circle, having individuals that you look up to and trust is very important, because if it's first time or you're not confident in that realm, you might take the whatever you're given and not even realize like how much weight you had in that conversation. When you talk to one of the OGs, they'll be, no, hold on now, Mario, before you do this, what was this? I didn't even think about that. I didn't even know that was a conversation. Well, what's this? What's your car gonna be covered? What's, all these other things, whatever capacity, right? Is make sure that it's being ran through people that you trust, and that is a realm that they have been experienced in and can provide you appropriate and meaningful guidance, as opposed to at times, we all know if you get an opportunity and it's something you've wanted, a lot of times you're gonna be like, yep, I'm gonna take it before they change their mind, right? You get into your head, you start thinking about these other things, and at times you don't realize like the ball is in your court and you actually have the control and say, but you just have to maybe have someone else kind of say, hey, did you think about this? Or, hey, did they even mention this? Shoot, I had no idea, right? And so don't go into it without preparing with individuals that you trust that can point you and guide you in those realms that you might not have been in before. So that's another part, is always have that circle. We talk a lot and have conversations just asking opinions. I call Kai and Kadani all the time, right? Just what do I do here? How do I go about that? And it's important because they've been there. right? And you have to have individuals, mentors that you trust, that is always going to continue to guide you in the right direction. So you're not on your own making those decisions.
Just really quickly, it's an adverb. The other thing that I was gonna say is, I know we've been talking a lot about monetary and increases. I think it goes without saying, and you mentioned a little, and we can chat if anyone has questions afterwards, but there's also other things that you can ask for, because it is a bottom line aspect, even though I've learned that, especially university setting, even if they say they have this amount of money, they always have a little bit more. But outside of money, there's other things, like if you think about like your lifestyle, is there anything else that the department could offer or organization could offer that could make your life a little bit better? Like whether it's, if you guys have strict working days, right? Or hours or something like that, if you could negotiate something like that within your contract, that's also something for you to consider. And then moving maybe on to the next question, if you're an assistant, or leeway into the next question, if you're an assistant, also understand that if you're asking for a certain amount of money, and truly the head coach is like, this is what it is, at least this is what they're telling me that it is, not to take it personal, because it is a business. And I also learned that along the way.
Yeah, I think we've kind of segued pretty clearly or pretty easily into the next question, which kind of hits on what Sammy mentioned with the experience he had as a head coach, and being able to go to your administrators or your decision makers and saying, hey, this is what someone else thinks of me. Sometimes you tell your boss that, and they'll tell you to your face, yeah, that's a better deal. Yeah, you should take that. So be prepared. Sometimes they call it, even if it's a bluff, sometimes they'll call the bluff. And so that kind of takes us into, I think this is our final question that we have, as an upfront question, which is, what advice would you give on recognizing that moment to pursue a new professional opportunity? And think of that as well, because whether that be the collegiate level or the club level or wherever, just to put that out there.
I'm gonna answer this question, but actually graciously, from a different lens of like my current situation, if that makes sense. But I guess how I've thought about it is, a couple things. If you find yourself always looking for something else. So what I mean by that is, you're in whatever situation you're in, but you're envious of something else. So you're like, ooh, like I know I got, maybe you got 3 boxes that you're trying to check, and you're checking 2 boxes really well. But for whatever reason, over the course of time, that 1 box becomes ever more exciting to you, all right? And so whatever, say another program has it, another person has it, and you become a little bit more envious of that. I think to me, that's your moment. That's your moment of like, I'm not fully fulfilled maybe in what I currently have. I also think it's, what are the boxes that are important to you? You can't always say that if you have your 3 boxes, you're not always maybe able to check all 3 of those boxes. But the boxes that you do check, do they align with, say, your values, right? Do they allow you to every single day come into work, truly feel like it actually, for it to not feel like work? Like, does it allow you to enjoy what you do on a daily basis? Like, if you feel like you're walking into the office and it feels like, all right, let me tighten up my bootstraps. Yeah, we grind. We all know, every single person in this room knows that this profession is a grind. We also all chose this grind, which I think we all have to remind ourselves of sometimes. But I think we also know there's a very different feeling about, this is a grind. Maybe it's the middle of the season. I'm grinding through right now, versus it feels like you are pulling yourself out of bed and pulling yourself into the office every day. And again, that's recognizing a moment, I think, as far as, how you move forward with that. And I guess I'll let the others talk about maybe what you do with that moment. But to me, that's the feeling that you get in those moments.
I was that person. Like, what was the next best thing? How can I get here? How quickly can I get here? Ooh, that job opened up. Kai, do you know the person there? Ooh, that job opened up. How can I get here? But in reality, for us, a lot of times we had to start in positions where, you know, I'm living in Santa Barbara making $14,000 a year. Not maybe the best fit for my family and I, right? But as I've gotten older, and when I really actually recently thought I was completely out of the college game, the thought process was, what would this next job, if it presented itself, provide for my family, me specifically, our environment. We live in Kansas, my wife's from Kansas, she wants to be in Kansas. We ain't going nowhere else. If that was the case, I would have already been somewhere else last year, right? And I had to come to grips with that. And some of you will have that conversation with your spouse eventually. Wife, husband will say, hey, I will not leave this proximity. And you have to be comfortable with understanding that maybe those opportunities are going to be minimal. So you're very strategic about what's a good fit for you, right? Kansas State fell into my lap. I thought I was done. It's home. We don't have to go anywhere. It just worked, right? But that doesn't always work that way. And so when we're checking the boxes, be intentional, actually determine what those boxes are. Because not everyone's boxes are the same. It's not a cookie cutter environment, right? What might be enticing to me or a good quality of life for my family, some of you be like, not a chance. I need to do more, or I can't do as much as that is, right? And so, you know, some of you see me, I'm working at the soccer.com booth. I work at soccer.com as well. For me, I gotta provide for my family. It's a balance. And so that decision was, how can I piece things together to be able to provide for my family, to meet my needs as wanting to be a college coach, also being there for my family as a husband and a father for my 3 kids, right? And making sure that my wife and my kids are happy with the environment that I'm able to provide them, right? The school system. If you have kids, what education are you providing your kids when you're moving to a new area, right? Maybe how diverse is the area, right? Those things matter, because I've lived in certain places where me and my head coach were the only 2 that looked like each other, and the bar owner in the town, and that was it, right? So when I moved to Kansas City and I went to my kids' class, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's some diversity here. This is amazing, right? And so those things, we're talking about, you know, we talk about the money a lot, we talk about the fit, but it's all encompassed, right? Your quality of life, when you come home after the grind at work, what's that balance look like? Are you having to go to the next job, or now you're on the field until 9 p.m., and then you're waking up at 6, and you're right back at it, and you're minimally seeing your kids, you're minimally seeing your wife, or your husband, your significant other, whatever it may be. It's a balancing act, and having open, transparent conversations with your significant other. Really understanding of what they want out of it, how they support you in it, and how it can work for everyone, because it is a grind. And sometimes you might convey that message, what a grind means, until they're really in it, you're really in it. The grind, it can make or break, and you choose whether or not that decision was the right one, or if that next opportunity is even enticing because of current experience you're gaining, saying, I don't think I want to go through that again, right? So now you start revamping what you think those 3 boxes look like, and well, guess what? Now they're 3 circles, and they look nothing like what the last 3 were, right? So being consistent and reflecting on what it is that you want out of it. I go back to going to your circle. I don't make any decisions without reaching out to my people. Like, I cannot do it, because I want to make sure that I know, maybe I'm looking at these 17 things that are important to me. And then I call them, and I'm like, well, did you think about this? Did you talk to them about it? I'm like, man, I didn't even think about that. That's a deal breaker. I'm not in. And if I didn't do that, I found myself in a situation like, man, I shouldn't have done that. And I did that for a very short time frame. I did it, and it backfired, right? And so it's a reality. I wanted to be a head coach, and I'm like, yep, I'm jumping on it, and I took it. It just wasn't for me, and none of those boxes were checked. I took the opportunity because that was my end goal for me. Those 3 boxes, head coach, this, that, and the other, I took it and realized, man, those actually weren't boxes. Those were like little semi points that maybe were things to consider, but they weren't It wasn't the main thing. And so my last thing is keep the main thing, and only you can decide what that is and what it looks like, and don't do it alone.
I'm gonna just say this really quickly. Be fair to yourself as you do that, because we're all gonna make mistakes. We're all going to be attracted by what we think of something is on paper, and then you get there and it's not the case, or be okay with yourself having different boxes over the course of your career, because the decisions I made as a 21-year-old high school varsity head coach are not the decisions I made as a 27-year-old head coach. They're definitely not the decisions I make as a 34-year-old with a wife and kid. So allow yourself to have some grace as you do that, because you will make some mistakes. But again, lean on that circle you have. And how many coaches in here are under the age of 30?
Don't do that. Don't do that. God, nobody put your hand up.
Identify. There you go.
So the whole reason why I bring that up is under 30, I was ready to chase a check. If my dollar amount was here and you offered me dollar amount plus, you had my attention. And that's where I think we've talked about this beforehand. The amount of research you have to do as a potential employee matters. It absolutely matters. Because I got this advice as a coach a while ago. One, if a job is open, you need to find out the reason that job is open. Because sometimes an assistant job opens up because that assistant loved their experience, did well, moved on, and progressed. Sometimes that job opened up because someone realized, I'm working for a crazy person and I need to leave for my well-being. So what's attractive to you might be really nice on paper, and without research looks like a better situation. Do your homework and find out the environment you could potentially be going into. Okay, so we wanted to make sure we left some time at the end for questions. If we could answer any, if you want to just yell from where you are, that's great. If not, we can take a mic to you.
Can you guys share with us what some of the most important boxes are for you guys?
Great question.
Yeah.
Did everybody hear that question in the back? Oh, so the question was, what are the boxes basically for us as a coach that we consider when we're looking for opportunities?
Yeah. So for me, it truly is 3 boxes, and it's enjoying what I do, enjoying who I do it with, and enjoying where I do it. I've generally pretty much decided, or I understand that pretty much I chose this profession, so I'm generally always going to enjoy what I do. However, the other 2 are for sure not a given. I can promise you that. And so to be in a space where you can, and also, and those are general, right? Like even those boxes are general. So you can dumb it down to, okay, what does it even mean to enjoy where you do it, right? So I get the one little, I guess, snippet I'll give you is, I did a graduate assistant position at Auburn University down in Alabama. I'm from New Jersey. Okay, that was my first experience in the South. And probably my last. And honestly, having nothing to do with the staff, like I love the staff at Auburn. I had a great experience. It was exactly the experience itself was exactly what I needed it to be, as far as getting my master's and basically getting into the profession without being like head deep into the profession, right? So getting to see what I was about to get myself into. So from all that aside, it was great. But I've also, again, I grew up in Jersey. I have never been so acutely aware of my presence in any given space, I'm a queer Black woman, okay? I've never been so acutely aware of my being as I was living in Auburn, Alabama. So I quickly realized I need diversity, whatever that means. And so I now live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is vastly different. So yeah, so that's what I mean. That's what I mean by like it's general as far as the where you do it. But those are my 3 boxes as far as who you do, and then again the people factor. And I think everybody in this room understands that of like you remember highs and lows, and you for sure remember moments from games and seasons and all the things. But that's the network piece. You remember who you do it with, right? And those are relationships that we've all been in this game long enough to know the amount of relationships that this game I'm sure has given you all, as well as myself, is limitless, and you can't put a price tag on that.
I'll piggyback on a lot of that. It's who you're doing it with, right? You're going to spend a lot of time with your coworkers, sometimes significantly more than you do with your family, sometimes significantly more than you want to, right? And that's an important thing. We had a lot of fun at Southern Utah, but we worked a lot, and it was enjoyable. We worked in our outside office, our inside office, wherever we worked, but we had fun, right? Another thing is, I'm married with children. I want to make sure that my environment, my head coach, or if I'm a head coach, my staff, we have some sort of relatability there. Because if I have a boss that doesn't have kids, 9 times out of 10, they're probably an unnecessary grinder. And now they don't understand that balance. Some do, and I know those who they are, but some don't, right? And so the importance for me to be able to at least take my kids to school, or maybe pick them up, or whatever that may be, is significantly important, right? And so that balance is extremely important for me. So, just a short story, right? I use Kai as a reference because I worked for him and I have a really good relationship. My youngest was born 3 months early. My wife went into labor 4 months early, was bedridden for a month, had to be airlifted to a hospital away from us. My kids stayed with Kai's family a lot when I had to drive back and forth to see my wife, and then for 3 months back and forth to see my daughter in the NICU. Well, if I'm on a staff where no one has kids or has that quality of life, I'm almost stuck, and I'm in Utah. That's all I knew. The moment my wife got airlifted, I called Kai, it was midnight, and he took my kids and I rushed to the hospital. And that environment is where it was like, okay, we got that support system. Mario, I got you. Drop the kids off. Go do your parenting thing. Go do your thing, right? So those things you have to consider, because maybe we work well together, but that component isn't as important to them. So my box is the family component, right? That balance, and then also the cohesion within staff. Because at times, like I said, man, you're gonna be with that staff a lot of times, especially in the season, get into recruiting. I mean, it's a grind. You're there every day. And so knowing that it's a safe space, it's a welcoming space, it's an opportunity for vulnerability, it's an opportunity for growth, it's an opportunity for community, because you're gonna spend a significant amount of time with these individuals. And if there's not that cohesion, there's conflict, there's resentment, whatever it may be, it starts bleeding. And some of you have seen it on staffs. The players notice it, your club players notice it, your high school students notice it, and then now it just has a trickle effect. And before you know it, there's an unintentional toxic environment solely off the fact that you didn't realize that you didn't actually see eye to eye. It was just enticing because the blue dot, the NCAA, I took that job because I wanted that job, and not even realizing, like, man, me and that coach have nothing in common other than the fact that we work for the same employer, right? And we probably have the same goal in mind, making the NCAA tournament, being relevant in conference, and making the conference tournament. And I'm just speaking from the college environment, right? But I also coach in club. Are my coaches in the same mindset? Do we go to the GA showcase and everyone's doing their own thing and you don't see each other? You got your teams and that's it. I watch Top Hat and you guys all walk together. I see it. I see those clubs and they're together, right? I see the Real Colorado, they're together. Some clubs, there's 6 different coaches for 6 different teams and there is 0 interaction other than maybe being on the same flight, right? Players notice that. And so those things are extremely important when You're trying to balance the on the field, off the field, balance of social life in your environment, and then how does it trickle over to your home environment? Are you going home and complaining to your spouse about your work day every single day? Well, guess what? You just create a toxic environment at home. So now your spouse is sitting there like, when are we gonna have our time? Because everything else is about work all the time, because you're not happy there. So that box it's all encompassed within that same check for me, just personally as a married father and having those children, that I have to really make sure that I'm gone for a week and a half. I know that my son and daughter can go hang out with Kalena and Kanoa for a day, right? And if I don't have that, then it's probably not a good fit for me.
One thing that's kind of, again, I agree with exactly what they're saying, environment, way of life. I'm also a very competitive human, like to a fault. I've apologized to a lot of people about that before. But I recognize that for my environment, I need, whoever I'm working for, I need their investment to match their expectations. Because if not, I can't be there. Because for those of you who are, this is an easy-ish reference. If you want MLS production and you give me USL League 2 resources, we are not talking about the same thing. I cannot be there. I won't be there. See you later. So just understanding that aspect of it, like I like to be very transparent in interviews with administrators. I like coaches to have been transparent with me when they talk to me. If I bring you in for an interview and I say for a college coach, hey, over the next 5 years, I'd like to see our team advance to the conference tournament 4 times, and I'd like to see a trip to the NCAA tournament. Or if I'm on the high school side and say, hey, I want us to compete for a conference title, and I'd like us to be positioned so that we can start making a run for a state championship. I'm gonna be that blunt. And then I'm gonna say, well, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make sure that, when you need such and such to train, we'll have that. This is all I can offer you when it comes to a film or video analysis or whatever it may be, but we'll make sure we're good with that and we'll take care of you. But both sides of that conversation have to happen for me. Yeah, any other questions? Or?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have talked about a little bit of, the limitations when you're an African American in this field or any person of color, really, about opportunities and all that kind of stuff. Can you guys give any examples in cases where you maybe leveraged your blackness for the good?
No, but I
Hey, we'll talk later.
Go ahead.
I'm a black coach in Kentucky, so I'm a rare jewel, right? And so when I see a black kid playing in Kentucky, when they come to my campus and they see me, their mom immediately goes, oh. See what I'm saying? Like that's what I don't mean, I'm not saying weaponize it.
Sound like we were. Sound like you got the squad.
I can take that. Within the college recruiting world, it makes a difference. It really does. I think, and Marsha and I were recruiting. Yeah, we're recruiting. It's 8 p.m. in the middle of Tennessee. It's cold and raining, and we're watching a game, or I was watching a game, and really nice black woman comes up and gives me a pamphlet and starts talking to me, and I'm like, okay, this is a pretty good conversation. Marsha comes up and she just starts talking to me and talking to us, and I was down bad in that moment, and she didn't know, and just the words she said, and the last thing she left us with is, you guys are doing such important work and you don't even know it. And for a person that I don't know who she is, she doesn't know who I am, but for her to say that, and there's been so many different times where I'm just walking on the field and a black parent comes up to me, says, hey coach, how you doing? Thank you very much for what you're doing. And there's been plenty of parents that want their kids to be coached by black coaches. Because there is a bit of a difference. I'm going to make sure that those kids are doing exactly what they need to do to be prepared to succeed in whatever that they want to do. Because of my experiences. And a lot of parents of color want that for their kids, and they want their kids to be in a space that forces their kids to do that. So within the college recruiting world, at least from my perspective or my experiences, it's helped. And it's been great. And different places I've been able to get kids of color to be able to come there, and there's been some cool places. I've lived in New Hampshire for 3 years, so, but for me, it's helped me be able to recruit and get certain women of color to those schools.
I'll co-sign that. You know, obviously visually we stand out. I've had, now actually I was just telling him in Florida 3 days ago, whenever that was, a mom hand me the flyer and say, "Thank you so much, we really appreciate you being here." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And she like held on to the flyer. She's like, "We really appreciate you being here." And I said, "Okay, I think I understand what you're trying to say. Happy to be here, you know?" So yeah, that, but I mean, that, like Sammy was talking about, she didn't realize in that moment, you know, that's like, oh, she caught me off guard, but also a refresher in my brain to remember why we're up here, you know, and why I take all of the calls and Zooms and everything else and speak on everything when I'm tired and don't necessarily want to. I know that I have to. And that was just a nice reminder in that way. Outside of the visual, I would say, and this is kind of going a little bit back to the last question, one of my boxes, when we're talking about the boxes being checked, is we talked about administration. My athletic director and my direct sports supervisor are awesome. Since I've been at American, I've had 2 black female administrators, which is rare because American is a predominantly white institution. But I requested the last one that I got, and that happened. But because of that, I feel like there's times that I can't authentically necessarily 100% be myself, and we all know what that's like. And because of her, I feel like I can be myself a little bit, just a little bit more. And I know when I've had conversations that, you know, well, I won't say exactly who, but an administrator at my school was like, "Oh, Marsha's kind of aggressive when she talks."
Ooh.
Right? But to be honest, you know, it's just who I am, and I'm loud by nature. But I am also direct when I need to be direct, and I think that they weren't necessarily ready for that. But I've had to tiptoe around a lot of things in my career, especially at being a head coach. But because of the support that I have upwards, it allows me to be a little bit more comfortable being authentically myself, which is rare and not everyone has that, but that's a box that I look for. Well, I'm staying an American, but should I go on, that's a box that I would look for. So that's something that is top down, and you know, we're talking about the players that we work with, but from an administrative level, if you're an administrator or a head coach or a technical director, anyone in a stakeholder capacity, thinking about that. Visually, it's good to be, you know, who you are and candid with people, but I think supporting those that are working with you and for you in that capacity is so important, especially if they're a minority.
All right, well, we are just barely over time, but again, on behalf of our Black Soccer Coaches Leadership, our entire community, thank you for being here today. Thank you for taking part in our sessions throughout the week. On our graphic, our social is tomorrow night at the Hilton Pacific Ballroom C, I want to believe.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Please come by. If you by any chance made it to the party in Philly,
I'll
yeah,
send out a
it is
link
what
to the
it is.
Cupid Shuffle, because
On
that will
that note,
happen.
But again, thank you all for coming. Enjoy your week.